Chair recognizes Representative Topper.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. One of obviously the benchmark you said is crime rate, right? But we're talking about a merger as we look at our overall budget picture. So there's another benchmark at play, and that's cost savings.
Yep.
I would assume that is also a big part of what we're trying to accomplish with the merger. And as someone who's not intimately familiar with the system, as I look over the merger savings summary in the testimony, are we saying that the savings, most of it is going to come by not bringing inmates back? Are we looking at staff reductions? Are we looking at a combination? If we could just kind of explain the merger savings, that would probably be helpful as we look at this in a budgetary sense.
Yeah, so it's about half and half. About half of it is reducing duplicative services, especially at the central office level. And the other half is a projection of, I believe, a 10% recidivism reduction. You want to discuss that part?
The recidivism part is we're projecting a 5 percentage point reduction in recidivism conservatively based on improving community corrections outcomes. As you may know, historically, our community correction centers have not produced good results, and we've been open about that in multiple reports that have been conducted on those community correction centers. And that's the population, and Director Little can speak better to this, that really crosses over between our two populations, between DOC and the Board of Probation and Parole. They're stuck in the middle there. The Department of Corrections pays for those centers. Board of Probation and Parole supervises them. And so, again, historically, we've had pretty bad results from those centers, and we think by this merger we can improve those results in a number of different ways, and so that we project, again, conservatively, that we can reduce recidivism by 5 percentage points. That translates in about 600 less inmates over a 3-year period of time. Just by way of reference, we're down 1,200 inmates this fiscal year. So another 600 inmates over 3 years, we definitely think is achievable. Again, not on the backs of not violating parolees, but by reducing crime, by doing things smarter, and actually increasing public safety.
And let's talk also about the reduction in duplicative services. Can you give us some examples?
Good morning. I think there are several opportunities, and to be clear about it, in terms of reduction of duplicative services, what we're talking about is reductions through attrition where appropriate. We currently, on the DOC side, operate the State Intermediate Punishment Program, and we house those in our Bureau of Community Correction Centers. Those individuals are actually, for instance, the investigations for the home placements, which is one of the last phases of that program, are currently done by BCC staff. We have 3 individuals to cover the entire state. This is something that the Board of Probation and Parole currently does statewide and has the capacity to do home plan investigations. We could redeploy those 3 staff that we currently have to other duties. Actually, we have 3 positions, 2 staff. I could do without one of those positions, which would be an immediate saving through elimination of that vacancy, and that those investigations could be readily absorbed in the overall workload as far as home plans. That's just one example.
Yeah. And just my last question, could some of those savings, in your opinion, especially when it comes to personnel, be achieved without the merger?
I think that, to speak just to the example that I used, at the heart of the merger, while the operations relative to supervision and sanctioning would remain largely the same, there are jurisdictional boundaries that right now keep us from working like that. We could not ask parole, for instance, to do investigations for the SIP participants. We could not coordinate on transportation, which we believe is another opportunity. And so I think to the extent that we break down the jurisdictional boundaries, that's key, and that's at the heart of the legislation. To the extent that we can better coordinate our services by not being under, if you will, separate silos, I think that's another a set of opportunities.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Topper.
Thank you. I appreciate the information about the job you're currently doing, but of course, this hearing's about the merger, right? The proposed merger. And Ms. Rosenberg's kind of touched on something. that I want to drill down on is, as public policy makers, we can't look at the individuals who are here now. And I know, Mr. Chairman, you had talked right at your opening statement that Secretary Wetzel, there's a good relationship, you feel comfortable with the people in place, but that you understand that that might not always be the case. But you still don't foresee a problem with the merger. And yet, we can't just foresee a problem, we have to foresee the potential of a situation where the Department of Corrections would then have the ability to influence parole decisions. All we have to see is the potential, and that has to catch our eye because we're trying to create public policy for 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, not just the next budget cycle or next year. So as I think about that, I guess the biggest question I would have is, considering that we have 20, 30 years of public policy and more that we could be making this on, are the missions of probation and parole inherently different than the mission of the Department of Corrections, in your opinion? Are there two separate missions?
I think the mission of both, and I don't like to use buzzwords, but the mission of both is public safety.
Well, but all due respect, that could be the mission of the entire government.
But I was going to expand upon that just a little bit, sir. Is baseline, it's public safety, but thinking about it in the terms of a continuum for that individual offender that we're dealing with. Excuse me. When we're talking about any individual, and that's what all this comes down to, is whatever, making sure that individual, if possible, does not go out and harm somebody else again, is that you are talking about making sure that they are incapacitated first off, that they get rehabilitation, and that they get reentry and reintegration services so that they come back out and can become a good contributing citizen and then finish their term in the community and not come back into the system again. I mean, that is the goal, and that's how I look at it as far as the mission is one, because it's over the whole thing. In fact, you could actually go back and add the DAs and the public defender and the judge on the beginning of that. So
I would agree. I mean, I think it's a criminal justice system, and I think we're all are looking to reduce recidivism. And I think the DOC does an excellent job starting that process. So when they come into the institution, they're assessed, determine if they need therapy for drug and alcohol abuse, if they're a sex offender, if they need violence prevention, whatever the various courses are, and they develop a prescriptive plan for what that offender needs to be successful upon release. They also provide vocational training, educational training. Those are all, to me, important aspects to help somebody to be successful once they are released into the community. And I think our guys reinforce the education and the skills that they learn while they're in prison. So if they take a violence prevention course in prison and they're having infractions, then we'll put them in some type of anger management booster. So we continue the programs in the community that were started while they were institutionalized. And the more seamless it is, I think the more effective it is.
And I get that, but under that description of the mission, and as you included judges and DAs and public defenders, then the point of a merger would be to say then anybody under that mission statement would be under the same secretary. Are we going to make the secretary of the new department then in charge of our judicial system as well? Well, no, we're not, right? There are specific roles for the courts, specific roles for parole probation, and that's what we're trying to nail down here specifically about a merger is, are we taking two entities that really have two separate missions within the criminal justice system and trying to make it work when we don't need to. I guess that's the, now, obviously, there's arguments that you can, but I think that broad mission statement probably covers a lot more than what we're really looking for. So, but I appreciate the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.